Hey, so a question we get a lot is how to have a conversation with your kids, an age appropriate conversation with your kids if you're thinking about getting divorced. I know I get that a lot. I'm Jenny Bradley with Triangle Smart Divorce here in Cary, North Carolina, and we help several people navigate through divorce, and this is one of the biggest concerns they have is being sure that their kids are okay and what to say. And I know you get this question a lot too.
Yes.
And this is my guest today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Katrina Jones. I'm a psychologist out of Durham. And we absolutely, whenever people are considering what they're going to do in divorce, this is always one of the biggest questions they have.
One of the big things we like to emphasize at Triangle Smart Divorce is having a plan, having a smart plan. And part of that plan involves telling your children that you're getting divorced or separated in an age appropriate way. And so I'm sure you've seen people mess this up. But probably the biggest misstep is, I would say, at least this is what I've noticed with my clients, is parents thinking that their kids don't need to know. And then they kind of wait until all the decisions have already been made and then say, oh, by the way, this is happening, guys. So
yeah, I think that parents worry about telling their kids too much. They worry about telling them the right thing. They worry about whether they should tell them anything at all. And they get very concerned about, like, when is the right time to have that conversation. It can seem kind of arbitrary to have a timeline. And it can be really helpful for people to have a sense of how they're going to navigate through this. So I do think it's important to have that plan, to know, generally speaking, what you're going to do, so that you can then talk to your kid about, and then, we can get into what you might say it for different ages. But, when do you talk to them? What do you say? What do you have kind of set up for yourself, like living arrangements and things like that?
And this is something I'm sure you talk to your clients about as well. And probably have even better advice than those of us as lawyers do, because our first thing is, well, don't tell them too soon, because maybe you haven't made up your mind yet. Maybe you are going to couples counseling, and maybe you don't need to confuse them yet if this isn't a decision that you know you're going to make.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece of advice to be giving people, is that you want to make sure that you are moving forward before you talk to your kids. I think parents worry that their kids are going to already suspect that something is going on. And that may or may not be the case, particularly for young kids. They don't know what they don't know. And so if you're sleeping in separate rooms, that can be the time where people will feel like, oh, we need to tell the kids that something's happening. No, you don't. So coming up with a plan for, we're going to move out within X period of time. I generally say you should have about 2 weeks where the kids know what's coming down the line and you have a plan. Telling them too soon can be problematic because it can lead to confusion. But waiting until, like, hey, mom or dad's moving out this weekend, that's not the way to go either.
Is this something that you also help parents figure out how to tell the children?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll transition to that then.
Okay.
So, Dr. Katrina, I know that psychology talks a lot about child development and formation of the prefrontal cortex and all these scientific things. We don't need to get into this conversation, but basically, are there different age groups at which certain conversations should and shouldn't be had, or maybe there's too much to tell or not enough to tell, or what would you say as far as somebody separating, maybe has young children that aren't even in school yet?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you have really, as long as your kid can talk, then you should be having some sort of conversation with them.
Okay.
And if they are in preschool or early elementary school, like kindergarten, first grade, right, then you really have to be thoughtful about what they can understand and what their concerns are going to be. And so if they are very young, then there isn't a lot that they need to know except how it affects them. I mean, really, I could say that for all ages.
I was going to say for even adult children.
Right. All kids, their focus is going to be on what is it going to mean for them. Particularly at this age, really thinking about their need for attachment, their need for love, and that they really view things through a very concrete lens. They don't need to know about why, even if they have questions like, why are you doing this to me, kind of thing, right? It's not about doing it to you, first of all. So at this age group, you want to be really thoughtful about, we both love you. This isn't because you've done anything wrong. Mom and dad, or mom and mom, or dad and dad just can't live together anymore. We are going to take care of you. We're going to make sure that you are loved and cared for, kind of period. And focusing on what it means for them means things like, we're going to have 2 different homes. You're going to live in both of those homes. We're going to put a calendar, very concrete, on the refrigerator. Bubba, your stuffed animal, whatever, is going to go back and forth, right? We're going to make sure that what is it that you're worried about having at each house, kind of thing.
And for things like your precious stuffy, that needs to be something that can freely go back and forth between houses. But then there are some things that it just makes sense to set up 2 households that are very similar, that the child feels comfortable in. I remember reading a lot about smells and things that children of this age are very tuned into as well. So even trying to use the same fabric softener and things like that can also help them have some familiarity and comfort, because if one person's staying in the home and another person is leaving, it's automatically a new space. And so I know that the person who's getting the new space is sometimes concerned about, well, how do I make my child feel comfortable here? Is that something you help clients with as well?
Yeah, I think consistency between the households is important. It doesn't have to be a replica, though. I think sometimes people can get kind of caught up in the wanting to have the exact same comforter or something like that. And it can be fun to pick out new stuff for a new place. This is where you have to know your kid and kind of, feel out whether or not they can get excited about having another place to stay, or if they need that, like some kids really will need the exact same comforter, the same kind of detergent, right? Having the room set up in a very similar way. But it can also be like going to Grandma and Grandpa's house, or going to visit Aunt Susie, where you don't have everything exactly the same, but you have that sense of warmth, and you get to bring your lovey with you and wear your same pajamas, and you can have 2 different toothbrushes, things that aren't attachment oriented. You can have replicas of that kind of thing.
Okay. Anything else you would want folks to know as they're thinking about telling toddlers, preschoolers, early elementary age children?
Yeah, I think remembering that at this age, the most important thing is that they feel like they're not going to lose you as a parent, that you're going to be there for them no matter what, and so is the other parent. Both of you are going to be there for them.
And I can suspect that some watchers of this video are going to go, well, that's great, and that sounds wonderful, Miss Psychologist, but that's not how it is in my family now, and that's part of the reason I'm leaving, is that the other parent isn't participating and isn't part of this. And so what do you advise people maybe where they haven't been 2 parents who can coexist?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be honest about how things are going to look. And so particularly at kids at this age, it needs to be very, very logistical. And so if one parent isn't around for any number of reasons, and the kid is used to that, then it won't be that different, except that when that parent was around, right, they might have to have an adjustment period to this, like the safety and security of, let's say, you know, mom is the kind of primary caretaker and dad's not there as often. So it'll feel like that, Susie, right? Dad's going to have his own house. You're going to live here with mom. Sometimes you're going to see dad at his new place. And we're going to make sure that you feel as good about that as we can. Yeah.
Makes sense. And I really like that idea of the shared calendar. I had a stepson, and we did that for him. Gosh, I think all the way up until maybe 6th or 7th grade. And you'd see him every day looking at him, you know. Anytime there was a slight change into it, too, it would throw the world upside down. But life happens, and sometimes things have to change.
Right.
You know, but that was a good visual cue for him that he could look. And then also, honestly, for us, didn't ask us every 3 days, where am I going when, and when am I doing this, and when am I doing that? So it's also good, I think, not to have to sometimes reopen those wounds as well. Well, how about older elementary school children?
Yeah, so when you start to get into older elementary school age children, the kind of primary developmental piece for them is that they really can feel like they are to blame. Kids really can get caught in a loyalty bind at this age. And so I think having a sense of, when you structure the initial conversation, right, like keeping in mind that they're going to be like, oh no, what did I do wrong? So that you can say something to them, you know, to the effect of, you know, mom and dad can't live together anymore. Sometimes adults just decide that they can't live together. We want you to know that we both love you and that this isn't because you've done anything wrong. Like very explicitly state that for this age, that we are going to, you know, do our very best to make sure that you feel comfortable in both homes. This is what it looks like. We're both going to be here for you, because abandonment can also be a pretty big concern at this age, where kids will feel like they're never going to see another parent, the other, you know, whoever they're not with, they're never going to see that parent again. And that can be a real fear for them. Even if they haven't had that experience, right? If both parents have been present and around, they don't necessarily know what it means. And they're at an age where it's not as common for them to be talking to their friends. So older kids might have friends whose parents are going through divorces, and they can talk to them about what it's like. But the younger kids haven't quite developed that, you know, kind of social group yet, or they have, but that's not what they talk about. They talk about sports.
That's not what they talk about. They
Right.
talk about the latest trading card game or video game or sports or something, but not emotions.
Right.
Well, how do you, what's the best way to say this? How do you find that parents can have these conversations? Are most of people able to sit down together and have this conversation? Is that the best way to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the best way to do it. I think it can be really hard.
Yeah, sure.
So I think the thing that people can get really hung up on is that they don't want to show too much emotion. They want to explain more than they probably should for the child's age. And they want to have this kind of like deep conversation about what happened in the marriage. And honestly, I don't think that that's really useful at most ages, but particularly for young kids, that's not a great idea. It's okay to be sad. I think a lot of parents worry that they have to like totally keep it together. And yeah, it would be helpful not to completely fall apart if you're having this conversation, but to have some tears or to show some emotion is human, and also can teach your kids that we can do hard things and we can have hard conversations and get through it, and everybody will be okay at the end of the conversation. I think not blaming is really important. I mean, it's important at all ages, but not just not blaming the kid, which I think is probably pretty obvious to most parents, but not blaming the other parent, right? That it's not because mom or dad did something. It's because adults sometimes can't live together, right? Like that's kind of the refrain that I ask people to consider.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of conversations. Well, I've heard about a lot of conversations going off the rails from some of our clients who feel like they need to be honest and transparent with their kids. And I'm not saying don't be honest. I'm not saying don't be transparent. But I think what we're both saying is you don't have to share everything.
Right. There
is a reason, and you may have one set of reasons and the other parent may have a different set of reasons, and so it's not the right place to have those conversations.
Right. And really keeping it focused on what it means for the kid, right? Like that really should be the focus of the conversation,
no matter the age.
Yeah.
Katrina, I imagine that talking to middle schoolers and as we're starting to get into adolescence is a little different than talking to your toddlers and your preschoolers about separating and divorcing and such. But a consistent theme through all of this is, how does it going to affect me? Maybe we see that more at this age group, or at least I feel like I saw this more at this age group. What advice do you have for parents who may have children in the middle school, maybe even early high school eras?
Yeah,
I'm sounding like Taylor. I'll back that one up. What advice do you have for parents who have children in the middle school and early high school years and such about children? Seems like to me this is when they start to kind of want to pick where they live too, or maybe even pick sides in the divorce and such. So I'm sure you've seen a lot here, probably more than I see, because I just hear the parents' perspective.
Yeah, having that sense of choice is something that kids really want and is not necessarily what's best for them.
Yeah.
So there's a balance there, right? I think middle school aged kids are different than high school age kids.
Okay.
I mean, there's some overlap, right? I think the thing to really keep in mind is that kids can be intellectually advanced, but that doesn't mean that they're socially and emotionally advanced. And so, kids can have a good vocabulary and we think that they can understand things, but they don't get it in the same way in middle school as in high school, or as in, early versus later high school, college aged, etc. Okay. So I think it's important that just because your kid is smart doesn't mean that they're going to understand, and doesn't mean that they should be privy to adult information. I think I feel like a broken record, right? But that's what I always come back to, is that it is about what it means for the kids. It's not about blaming the other parent. It's not providing too much information. But at this age, kids may be aware more about what's happened in the relationship. And so being open and honest is different than talking about all of the things. So I think, like, if you have a parent who has a substance use problem, you can't not talk about that, because it gives the wrong message that we just cover it up.
Yeah.
So if your kid has seen the other parent, like, come home, pass out on the floor, then part of your conversation might be, mom or dad is struggling with alcohol. I know you've seen that. We're trying to make our house safer by having them live somewhere else. And it's still important. Kids want to see both parents, even in what might seem from an outside perspective to be a really hard situation. Kids love their parents and they want to have time and contact with their parents. So I think, kind of the maybe less dramatic example, though, would be that yeah, mom and dad are getting separated and using more kind of age appropriate terminology that they'll hear. They'll either hear it at school or they'll hear it with their friends. I think particularly in middle school, it can be helpful to have someone in the back of your mind that you know your kid knows who has gone through a separation or a divorce, whether it's the kid or another safe adult in their life.
Let me ask you something to follow up on your substance abuse example. I know that children in this age still also sometimes blame themselves. And so how would you handle a situation where it is an alcohol abuse issue, but maybe the kid is the one that said, Dad, other dad was driving drunk, or, he embarrasses me at the pool because he drinks too much, or whatever, saying that, hey, we know you've seen this, you've been subject to it, we're trying to make the household safe, and the kid not feeling responsibility for, oh, I'm the one that told.
Yeah, that really can be hard. I think, being able to focus on, this is going to be dependent on the kid.
Sure.
Right? So if you know that they tend to be the type who will put the blame
Take
on themselves, right? Yeah. To be able to just be upfront about that. I know that sometimes you can, right, whatever the thing may be, you can beat yourself up, or sometimes I worry that you take on too much responsibility. I know that you told me about Dad, driving the other day. I don't want you to think that this is because of anything that you did. It's because of what Dad is doing, right? So that and then you, I think, have to revisit the conversation. And in that kind of situation, having a therapist or a counselor at the school who knows what's going on can also be helpful, so that they have someone else that they can talk to who's going to probably say the same thing, right? That of course it's not your fault, kiddo. It's your parent who is an adult who needs to take responsibility for their behavior.
Yeah. I liked what you said about having a safe other adult type person, and we've actually seen that here at the office, where one of our early young high school students, his friend just showed up at his door, had no idea that his parents were getting separated or divorced, and they just dropped that on him. And he ran away, but ran to his friend's house, and happened to be someone who worked here who has also gone through divorce, and the mom was very grateful that they found him and he had a place to go, but also said something along the lines of like, would you mind if he hung out over here a little bit more, because I think he's not feeling comfortable at home right now. Because he's missing his dad.
Right.
And I don't know, that may or may not have been agreed upon separation. I don't know the facts about any of that whatsoever, but I do know that was very helpful for that kid. And also was, just good parenting and modeling that this is what we do. We show up in the community, and it takes a village sometimes.
That's right.
So
That's right. Yeah.
It's good.
That also leads me to think about having those conversations with other people, other important people that your kids are going to interact with. So whether that's teachers at school, your neighbors who they're going to see regularly, but your family, right? And so considering what you're saying to those people is also really important, that you're not bad-mouthing the other parent, but also that you're not like setting the stage for them to either overhear you talking to other people, or for those people to have sometimes maybe too much information, or to have information that they somehow feel like they should be sharing with the kid. I think particularly with like extended family, that can become a problem.
Yes. And we say that just as a matter of course for being smart about the process as well, because you never know who might get called in as a witness in court if that's where you end up. Right. You never know what screenshots might live forever in infamy, what text messages might get shared with your child, and never say anything that you wouldn't be that you would be embarrassed for your grandma to read is what we say a lot.
Right.
And then I had one lady tell me one time, well, my grandma's worse than I am. I said, okay, well then pick whoever the
Whoever
saint,
the other person is.
pick whoever the saint is in your family
Yeah.
that you wouldn't want to see this, or, you know, your friend or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, you need a safe place to vent as a parent, but it's not your kids.
Right.
And it's also not some of the people who are going to be in the sphere of influence of your kids, because we're all human. And kids at this age, particularly, I think middle school and high school, are very in tune into facial reactions and body language too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And whether they interpret it correctly or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whether they interpret it correctly or not, but they will spy it. They may think it's about them. They may think it's about the other parent. They may think whatever, and it may be a complete different face than you intended for them to see. But, you know, they eye roll with the best of them, and they notice it when we do too.
Yes. And I think particularly at middle school age, kids do spy, right? Like it's funny because I think parents either think that their kids have no idea that something going on, which is usually not the case, at least not at this age, or they think they know everything that's going on, which is also not the case. And they think like they don't care, which is definitely not the case. Kids snoop. Yeah. They look at your phone. They look at your computer, right? Anything that you lay out, documents that you have laid out, they're going to look at them. I mean, it's so tempting. Come on, you know? And I think they kind of want to hear what the adults are saying to each other. One, to get more information, but two, to form their own opinions. Again, only getting half of a conversation on a phone or something like that.
Right.
So,
yeah, I mean, that's a good point too. That remember, just because your child's not in the room doesn't mean they're out of earshot.
Yeah.
So be very careful about your phone conversations as well.
Right.
Not only with the other parent, but with anyone.
Yeah. And I think for early high school, well, maybe not so much early high school as later high school, but depending on the kid, this is also a stage where kids will start to have thoughts about, you know, what relationships are and what it means for them and their development in relationships. I think a lot of parents will say that they don't want their kids to see the model of a bad relationship, and that's one of their reasons for wanting to get divorced. They want their kids to have a healthier picture of what relationships are like. And I don't disagree with that. I think that that's really helpful. I think it's important to, again, if that comes up in conversation with your kid, that you're focused on what their fears are for themselves versus what they think they know about your marriage, because they don't know everything, right? Even if you've had super loud, you know, contentious fights, they don't know everything. And so I think being able to refocus it on what is it that you are worried about that means for you. Have you had any like disagreements with friends at the younger age? Have you had disagreements with your dating partners at the older ages? And keeping in mind that their perception of relationships, while it's not all going to be about what your relationship looks like, that is one of their models. And so that might be something that they're struggling with and they want to talk more about. And you have to make sure you don't kind of get sucked into the, well, let me tell you what not to do or what happened in this relationship, right?
Learn from my example.
Right.
Yeah, that was something you said there I was going to jump in on. Now I've totally forgotten what it was. Oh, I remember. You were saying at that age that, you know, they think that they may know this or they may know that. And I think it's just as important, as you were saying, for the parents not to assume that they know what the children's fears are.
Right.
Because I think parents can sometimes go in and start over-explaining and dealing with things that the kid doesn't even have a concern about, and now the kid has a concern because the parent brought it up, or the kid tunes out because, you know, we talked for more than 30 seconds for a video, right? And so leading with, you know, what fears do you have and what concerns you have, but also leaving the door open for them that this isn't the single conversation we're going to have on this, because
that's right.
hey, you as the parent have been thinking about this for a while, and your kid may be actually feeling that this is real for the first time, so it may take them some time to process too.
Yeah. And I think, there are some things that kids generally have fears about at this age, things like, what does it mean for my social life?
Right.
Are my friends,
or my sports?
Yeah, my friends, my sports, where am I going to live? Do I get to have a car now? Like, what does it mean financially?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, they might not be thinking about any of that. So to put what your worries are on them, can be a little bit heavy. So I think being open to checking in and saying, hey, I know we talked about this thing, a couple of days ago. Do you want to revisit it? Do you have any questions? My door is always open. You can come and talk to me. You can come talk to whoever the other parent is. I think that's also important, that you don't position yourself as the only one who has information or comfort. And so whether that's the other parent, you can talk to grandma, you can talk to next door neighbor, that kind of thing. Whoever Susie is, because I always use that name.
Susie is a lot of people to you. I've noticed. Susie could be a therapist, and they may need a therapist to talk to as well, because they may not feel comfortable talking to their parents about what they're afraid about their parents. Yeah. And I've seen somewhat at this age, and maybe more as we get into older high school, children almost feeling like they have to take on the role for the parent, the role of the parent, I should say, that like has left. Yeah. So I think, but if you lead with that, then I think the child's going to think, oh, they're expecting this from me.
Right.
And so best to deal with some of these things organically, and sometimes work past the fine, okay, that you're going to get from a teenager. Right. But also know when to kind of back off and let them come back to you.
Yeah. I think it's important to, things are always striking a balance, that you might need your older teenager to help out in ways that they haven't been responsible for in the past. Maybe you always in your mind thought, when they get their driver's license, they're going to be picking up, their little brother or sister from
Susie,
practice.
their little sister.
That's right. But you've not ever had that conversation with them. And so it might be kind of a normal part of what you would have expected, that they are then saying, well, now you're making me do all these grown-up things because of the divorce. Or it could be that you actually are asking them to do something because of the divorce, because you aren't going to get home from work
before the garbage has to be set out.
Right. And so now you're asking them to do something because you're not there and the other parent's not there, but it still has to get done, kind of thing. So I think that the balance of, it's not your responsibility to take care of me. It's not your responsibility to take care of your siblings, except maybe when it is, but let's be really clear about what those things are and why it's is or isn't about the divorce. And open communication around, are you feeling overwhelmed? Does it feel like it's too much? I think it can also happen in the other direction, where the sad parent is the one that the older kid wants to take care of. So the parent who's had to move out, or the parent who doesn't have as much going on in their life, kind of to the kid's perspective. And
or from the kid's perspective, the parent that was left or abandoned.
Right, yes. And so I think being thoughtful about what you hear that's not as overt, like, oh, parent A, was talking about how sad it is to cook a meal for one person, rather than getting caught up in, I cannot believe that parent A is talking about being sad about cooking for one person, right? Kind of refocusing on, that is hard. An adjustment like this is hard for all of us. And I want to make sure that you are still feeling like you're being cared for. Is there something that I can do to help you either talk to parent A or whatever. Do you want me to talk to parent A? Do we need to come up with a cooking plan? Like whatever it is kind of thing. Because sometimes kids will say things as a little branch, right? Like they want you to pick up on what they're saying without saying it.
Sometimes. And sometimes I honestly think they want to stir the pot.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you said that. I mean, I think that middle school and high school age kids, I mean, all humans lie. We all lie, right? And I think particularly at this age, they're learning about how to lie to get themselves out of trouble and how to lie to get things that they want. And some kids are just more drama llama prone than others. And so that's when you have to know that about your kid. Really, it's looking at, is this a change in behavior or is this do I need to be worried about this because it's a change in behavior, or is this, kind of how they normally do? Like, did you ask for the video game of one parent and they said no, so you go to the other parent when you live together, then the parents figure it out. When you don't live together, then the parents might not figure it out as quickly. So, yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, parents will label that as manipulation, and we put meaning on manipulation as a bad thing when it's not always. Sometimes we're just trying to get our needs met. And if we can remember that kids are doing the same thing, that, we can be less upset with them for some of their behavior.
Got it. Katrina, we have a lot of folks that are waiting to get divorced till their kids are later in high school or maybe even going off to college and such. And that seems like a different, I don't know how to say it, a different situation perhaps in how the children react and feel and what they are afraid of and such than toddlers and even middle school children, even at some point early high schoolers. Yeah. Especially if they aren't terribly emotionally mature middle schoolers or high schoolers and what. So how does the conversation shift if you're a parent who has somewhat older children and you're going through separation or getting divorced?
Yeah, I think that independence is a really important piece to keep in mind at this age.
Yours or the kids?
Well, maybe a little bit of both. I think kids are, 16 and older, really, that you're starting to develop more independence of thought, but also you just can do more. You can drive, maybe, or you can at least walk or bike somewhere, and you're, as a parent, you're less worried about them, and they certainly think that they're invincible, and so why should any of that change? Kids can get, at this age, really can get worried about their lives being significantly upended. If I am used to studying at this house, at this desk, and you're suddenly asking me to do that somewhere else, replicating the desk isn't the point, right? And they can get pretty, I don't know, maybe not snotty, but that's the word that comes to mind, yes, about that. And like in their own routines. And I think that when kids are younger, we set their routines. As kids get older, they set their own routines. And we might still have influence over that, but it's not the same. Even if your kid has a bedtime kind of thing, you just have less control. You have more influence, less control, I guess would be a way to think about it. So I think as that need to flex independence comes up, that really needs to be something that you are considering in how you talk about what you expect of them. There are a lot of kids who will just kind of go with the flow, and they view their parents as authority figures. And so if you tell them that they're going to go back and forth between houses 1 week to the next, they might not like it, but they'll figure it out. Or maybe they'll be really excited. I always tell people to remind them that maybe they can get 2 holidays, 2 Christmases, 2 birthdays, whatever. And particularly at that age, it can be a motivating factor, right? Extra presents kind of thing. But I think because of that, they also think that they are entitled to more information, entitled to more choices. And because they are in some ways entitled to more freedom, that they can just kind of pick and choose where they go. I think it can also then become a conflict of, I prefer this house because this is the house that I'm used to. And it really doesn't have anything to do with not wanting to see the other parent.
Oh, it's not about who's in the house. It's about where the house is, and it's easier for the bus schedule, or my friends live in the neighborhood, or our carpool is here for sports or activities or whatever. It's about, I see a lot more at this age. It's a lot more about, I want nothing in my life to change. You've made a decision, but don't let it affect me.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think like thinking about sports and all of the stuff that you have to schlep, right? Like if I can just leave it at one place, why would I want to have to take it to school and carry that much more stuff? That kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. But parents don't feel that way.
Right.
Right. Because I think rightfully so, they see it as, well, this child's picking sides. And they see it as how it's affecting them, just like the children are seeing how it affects them.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's hard not to feel rejected. I think it's pretty normal to feel rejected and to remind yourself that it's not necessarily a rejection of you as a person or you as a parent. It's a rejection of the change.
Right.
And so, I think some parents will also, in my opinion, overcorrect and try to involve their older kids in decision making. I think once you get to college, that's different than when you're in high school, right? So if you're a junior or a senior in high school, it might make sense to involve your kid in some of the decision making. So if what you're used to is that one parent is the one who has always gone to swim meets, and having the other parent at swim meets, particularly if they're out of town travel meets, is suddenly weird, then the request to keep that the same might be reasonable and not a rejection of the parent, but just wanting things to be the same. It might not be reasonable for them to come up with the plan of where they live and how they see their parent and what all of that looks like. And I think there are parents who want to give their kids choice for the right reasons, but they go about it in a way that really ends up putting the kid in the middle, and feeling like they are put in a bad situation that they don't even know how to articulate, that they don't want to be stuck or they don't want to be the one who's making the decision. Even about small things like, do you want to have a shared birthday party? I don't know. Anytime you get that kind of answer, it's like, okay, maybe the adults are the ones who need to make this decision. So you could offer up the input, opportunity, whatever. But then at the end of the day, recognizing that you might need to make the decision on your own. But for college kids, like, where are you going to come home at summer break or at a holiday break, right? What house do you go to? And for parents to say, well, just decide where you want to go. Oh, how am I supposed to make that choice? I want to see both of you, but I want to go to this house because that's where all my stuff is and my friends are and what I'm used to. So I think, the balance again of having some input, but being willing to make the choice rather than, I think some parents will err on pushing their kid to make that decision, and that can be really problematic.
Would a better thing be to make a suggestion and then ask how they feel about it? Like, what do you think if we had a joint birthday party?
Yeah. And I think, I think you can even lead with, I assume you want to spend time with both of us at, if you come home for like a winter break. Here are some ideas about what that could look like or any other ideas that you have. Because I think setting up the expectation that we expect that you love both of us can be really helpful to kind of get a kid to feel like they're off the hook from
Right.
having to pick one parent over the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there are some kids that, for various reasons, really do choose sides,
Mhm.
and probably has more to do with attachment theory than we can get into here, as well as comfort level and who they feel like meets their needs better and all of those things. But knowing that the dynamic that was within your family when you were together likely is not going to change when you're apart is something I think that the parents need to be mindful of too.
Right.
Like, if this has always been the way it is, now that you've decided to go your separate ways, don't suddenly expect that your child is going to be comfortable doing a 50-50 schedule at 17 years old.
Right. Yeah, I think it's particularly hard for the older teenagers because they have lived this way for so long, right? You know, when you have a little itty bitty kid, you can pick them up and put them in a car seat and drive them to a different place. I think there are parents who feel, again, rejected by, well, why don't you want to spend time with me? And so I think being willing to talk about, I feel sad that you don't want to come over to my house because I need us to have a good, close relationship. Can we talk about that, right? Without making the kid make a choice. I think parents also can worry that they shouldn't talk about their feelings. And again, it's the balance of not putting your stuff on your kid and being willing to model that we can all be vulnerable and be sad sometimes, and that it's okay to talk about those things is important, particularly in the older years, right? Because kids can handle it more. And particularly, again, in college, kids will have their own thoughts about that and have experiences of other people's families, much broader experience once they've gone off to college and they meet all sorts of kinds of people versus the kids at their school, in high school, or in their neighborhood.
And sometimes get to reinvent themselves too, because they're with new people. And you may find that they're like, I don't want to come to either one of your house. I want to go to our good friend Susie's house.
That's right.
And I want to go stay with her.
They go skiing in the winter or whatever.
Because they go skiing, or because they, have a house on the lake or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Because it is their break from school too. And one of the last things they want to do on their break from school is be stressed out.
Right. Yeah. I think that traditions are one of those things that are really important. I mean, they're important across ages. I think older kids really can get kind of caught up in what we normally do type of thinking. And so, I'm just thinking about, they might say, well, just like all bets are off and I'm going to go start a new tradition, spending time with Susie again. But I think they also might have really strong opinions about, this is how we're supposed to spend this particular holiday or my birthday or whatever. This is what we always do every summer. We have always gone to visit Grandma and Grandpa in Connecticut. What do you mean we can't do that this year? There might be greater concerns about finances, related to that type of thing. Are they, are you still going to pay for college? Are you going to buy me a car? Can we go, to the beach house that we always go to? And sometimes you might have to say no, that I actually can't afford that right now, which can also lead to hard conversations, but are necessary.
And hard conversations, but maybe the detail of which is not needed.
Right.
We don't need to know that your mother blew all the money shopping and that's why I can't afford you to have a car. We just need to say that, well, we now have two different households and it costs more money to have two different households, so we're not going to be able to get you this car, but we can get you that car, or we can talk about when you can use my car or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
and that's an important one going back to young children who get to take their lovey or stuffy or whatever you want to call it back and forth. I've had some cases before and seen cases before where parents are like, well, I bought the car and you can't take it to the other parent's house. You know,
Yeah.
and that's, to me, not focusing on what's best for the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that with cars, cell phones.
Oh, I haven't seen it with cell phones, but I bet
yeah.
I just haven't heard about it.
I bought the phone, or I pay for the plan.
Ah.
Therefore, it's my phone, and you can't take it to the other parent's house. Yeah. Yeah, I think remembering what you would have done if you all lived together can be a starting point for some of those kinds of decisions and conversations that you have. And I think particularly when they're older, you can have more honest conversations about things like, yes, money is tighter right now, and it doesn't have to be because your other parent did something wrong.
Yeah. And good conversations to have with children before they go off to college and maybe start budgeting some things for themselves. And every credit card company in the world is approaching them with a free offer and some freebie at every football game and basketball game and everywhere else they may go.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we've talked a lot about children from, speaking age all the way through college age, but children, no matter how old they are still affected by divorce and separation of their parents. So some people might be surprised by that. I'd be surprised if people were surprised, but just in case, why is that so? That you can be a strong, independent, grown adult and still be traumatized by your parents' divorce?
Yeah. I think, it's true across the lifespan that we are both of our parents, right? And so we identify as a part of this family unit. And having the sense that that is going away can be very disruptive at any age. I think for adults who have moved on to kind of the next stage of their own life, I think especially if your parents are getting divorced and they are in their 70s, you are struggling with your own life transitions. Maybe you were thinking yourself about getting a divorce, and now you're like, does that mean I shouldn't do this? You're sending your kids off to college. You have your own kids in daycare, and you're trying to figure out how to run a, two-person household kind of thing. Like all of the things that come along with adulting and feeling now like I have to worry about my parents where I wasn't worried about them before. So there's a sense of identification of the family unit, and that's dissolving, and that can be stressful. There's a sense of, what does this mean for me if my parents could divorce after all of this time? Did that fight with my husband last night mean that we're on the same trajectory? Oh my God, are my parents going to be able to help out with daycare anymore if they used to, do a lot of childcare or schlepping kids around? Does it mean that the inheritance that I thought I was going to get is now going to be paid to all of these attorneys? That kind of thing.
Darn attorneys.
Yeah, I think it can be really stressful for kids who feel like they need to kind of step in and take over as well. And depending on the age of their parent, they might need more or less support. But I think whatever the dynamic was when the adult child was younger, that can also kind of start to rear its head. Either intentionally or unintentionally. The older child syndrome kind of thing might start to pop up, and let me come in and attend mediation with you, or help you sort out where you're going to live, or kind of come in and take over. And parents might actually need to set their own boundaries around their adult children trying to help them. And adult children might need to set their boundaries around not getting pulled into the middle of something. And I think parents can feel more comfortable talking to their adult children about what happened in the relationship, but still remembering that this is their parent. And so, like, you know, I can badmouth my mom all I want, but you're not allowed to talk bad about my mom. That kind of thing happens, that parents need to keep that in mind, that no matter how old your kid is, you're still bad-mouthing their parent.
Who is part of them.
Right, yeah.
Whom they identify with in some capacity. And
Right.
so subconsciously may see it as an attack on themselves too. Like,
That's
well,
right.
you don't like that about dad, maybe you don't like that about me.
Yeah.
So, yes, we have seen it cause identity crisis sometimes.
Yeah.
We've also seen it be very disruptive to what used to be family traditions. And adult children having concerns about, well, what's going to happen when I have the first grandchild now? Are both my parents going to be able to come to the hospital? Are they going to be able to come to my wedding? Who's going to sit where?
Right.
And those kinds of things. So similar concerns that younger children have. How does it affect me?
Right.
But also, I think what you said, some just also fear about, gosh, I thought I was at the phase in life now where I was going to be able to focus on my family, and now maybe I might need to help in with mom and dad.
Yeah, and I think the extended family piece too, that how am I going to navigate Aunt Susie? I can't stop.
You can't stop with Susie.
Right? Like, this is my favorite aunt and I want to spend time with her, but she's my mom's least favorite sister-in-law. Is that going to upset her if I want to spend time with her? And is dad going to get mad at me for seeming like I'm taking mom's side about how I spend time with the extended family? You know, if you have a rich uncle or rich aunt and you always get to take advantage of their beach house and your parents are really angry with each other, where does that leave you as the adult child, right? So I think there are lots of levels of complication that people often will forget about, and just assume that their kids are going to be fine. They're adults. They have their own thing going on.
They saw this coming for years.
That's right. Yeah.
And maybe they did, or maybe they didn't, because they were so caught up in what was going on in their own life.
Doing their own thing.
Doing their own thing and taking and trying to live their best life and doing this thing called adulting.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, call it gray divorce, if you will, older folks, when they're getting divorced, sometimes not only tend to overshare, I think, with their children, but also over-involve. And you touched on it. Like, as a lawyer, it's really difficult to be at a mediation and have someone in the room who is not a party to the marriage. They're often less helpful than they are helpful.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, they are the child of both parents. And so they can't be neutral advocate in the room for mom and not be somewhat still thinking about how this is going to affect dad.
Right.
And so, you know, when you're in the room, you're still advocating for your client. You're not the mediator who's supposed to be a neutral person. You're still being an advocate. And so that's difficult. And I've heard about them, like, taking mom to therapy and then wanting to attend the therapy session as well. And so I'm sure that that's popped up for you, where it's like, this isn't your therapy session. This is mom's therapy session or dad's therapy session.
Yes.
And I don't need you in here to tell me all the things that went wrong in the marriage. I'm going to talk to them about what they need help with. Yeah.
And I think piggybacking on that they might have really strong opinions about what the other parent has done wrong. And like, why didn't you leave 20 years ago when we were all suffering whatever?
Right.
And so I think that can play out too in, you know, kind of over involvement on the part of the kid, or even with the best intentions, like, let me tell you about all of the things that happened that you need to help protect my parent from
Right.
happening in this divorce process,
Right.
whether it's with lawyers or mediators or in therapy.
Yeah. Which is useful information, but doesn't allow either one of us to do our jobs.
Right, right, yes. I think, there are times when if you can set the right kind of expectation around it, it can be really helpful, right? And so I will say something like, I would love to hear what you think is important for me to know that your parent has been struggling with. Let's have a separate meeting for that. And I intentionally make it shorter. Or if that isn't something that's going to work, then maybe you can put all of your thoughts together in writing and give it to me that way, kind of thing.
And then it's even harder for us because the attorney-client privilege only extends to the client. So I can't say anything about what is going on in the divorce to the adult child. They can tell me everything they want to tell me about what I might need to know or what they think I might need to know.
Not even with permission?
With permission, yes, I can speak with them, but then it can be used in court.
Gotcha.
So, we lawyers always run around afraid of what can be used in court. So it's not a privileged conversation if it's not just the attorney and client, even with permission if it's a lay person. Now, if it's a professional and we were hiring you as a consulting expert or something like that, different thing. And you might go around and collect collateral information for us from lots of different people. But yeah. So it does get tricky. And sometimes I think people think we lawyers are like trying to hide behind something and not want to get all the information. And it's really not that as much as we're trying to protect the situation so that if we do end up in court, which knock on wood, I know you have to testify in court sometimes as well. None of us really want to be there. And you really shouldn't want to be there either in your divorce case because you lose all control about what happens to your future if you end up in court. But that's the background that we have been trained with lawyers to think of is like, I got to protect my client at all costs about if we might end up in this place.
Right. Yeah.
So that's tricky. But I can see how for you having an independent session, and for me as well, just an independent session of like, is mom starting to show signs of cognitive issues? Because that's very important for us to know. Is
there something that you saw happen, right, within the marriage that you're worried is going to come up now, like withdrawal, depression, substance use that they did a really good job of kind of keeping under wraps, but now that there's this big stressor is going to be something that they fall back on. It doesn't always have to be that dramatic, but it can be they shop too much and you're really worried that they're going to spend all of their retirement money on, whatever. So, I think, again, it's a balance of how can you gather information without making it into a therapy session for the kid. But I think there are also times where having an adult child and their parent in a family session can be useful. You have to be thoughtful about how that's going to go and how it's going to be used and at what point of the process that would be useful or not.
Sure, I can see that. How do you recommend that adult parents kind of set their boundaries and put up their, I won't say fence, but if they don't want their child involved, but their child very much wants to be involved, how do you recommend that they go about that so as not to alienate their child, which they don't want to do, but at the same time to let their child know, like, hey, I need to do this for myself and for my own reasons, and I don't want you to live my divorce with me. I just want you to be a support for me.
Right. I think being able to demonstrate competence can be helpful, providing information without inviting involvement. So I just wanted you to know that I set myself up an appointment to talk with this attorney. I have my list of questions. These are the things we're going to be covering. I appreciate that you've been worried about this. And I want you to know that I've got it covered and I'm taking care of it, so that it's validating that underlying fear of what's going to happen. Are you going to miss something, be mistreated, not understand something, but still saying, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay, honey. I've got it.
So, Katrina, we've talked about a lot of different age groups, and it seems like there's some common threads amongst all of them. And I know you'll have probably more to add when I kind of recap here. But first of all, parents are making a decision that's obviously doing what they feel is best for them.
Right.
But then, when they explain this to the children, they need to focus more on how the children are going to be affected.
Right.
And that's sometimes a hard gear to shift.
Yeah. I think that's where kind of planning out what you want to say rather than going off the cuff can be helpful. I mean, you got to be organic to a certain extent.
Sure.
But I think having a sense that you don't want to talk about the relationship factors, right? At least not in the very first conversation, even with older kids. You don't want to blame or throw the other parent under the bus.
Yeah.
To the extent that it makes sense and is possible, you want to try to have it as a joint conversation. Think about the timing of the conversation, right? Like not as somebody's running out the door on the way to school. Maybe on a Friday night. I realize we didn't really talk about that. Kind of on a Friday night when they have access to both of you and can ask questions, go off into their room, do their own thing, watch a movie, whatever. That can be really helpful. I think remembering that because your decision is an adult decision, that even when you want to share more about what that is, that's not necessarily what's going to be helpful. Even when your kids ask why, even when they're really nosy and they want to dig into your stuff, right? It's kind of like it's good for them to eat vegetables. You make them do it anyway, right? So like it's good for your kids not to think badly of the other parent. And to the extent that it matters, if you say something, the other parent might say something bad about you, right? And so always kind of keeping in mind that you want this to be as balanced and neutral of a conversation as you can make it. Yeah.
And remind them that no matter what the parents have decided, that you love them and they're not to blame.
That's right.
For the decision that has been made.
Right. There isn't anything that, they have done that is wrong. There isn't anything that they can do to change it as well.
That's really important.
Right. So I realized we didn't really touch on that, but for some kids, particularly younger kids, they can feel like if I just am the best little kid that I can be, then you'll get back together. And so I think that's where timing can be important, is that you don't wait too long, but you also don't give this long stretch of, I thought you guys somebody was moving out. Oh, maybe if I do something good, it'll keep you together. And even adults have fantasies about their parents reconciling, because again, it comes back to what it means for the kid. Like, it's easier for my parents to be together. That doesn't always mean that I think it's what's best even, right? Like, I might be ready for arguing to stop, or for, as an adult, I want my parent to be happy. right? But it sure would be easier if I didn't have to worry about where I was going to be, for Easter or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or whether or not, we were going to, it would be easier for me and my extended family if we could continue to go to mom and dad's beach house and not worry about who's going to get it in the divorce.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it seemed like another thing that you said is pretty consistent among all the age groups is that children also have some basic fears that are the same no matter the age.
Mm-hmm.
And one is that they're going to be abandoned.
Right.
Another is how, maybe this isn't true for toddlers and maybe even elementary school students, but certainly for some of the older kids we talked about, like, how is this going to financially impact things I can now be, do, and have?
Right. Yeah. And who is going to, I think that abandonment piece also shows up as who's going to show up for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think kids have fears that one parent is just going to disappear, either because they haven't been around as much, or one parent has been a primary parent for lots of reasons, some which may be really reasonable in the adult world. But yeah, I think kids worry that, it just all comes back to they worry about what it means for them. Right. Are you going to be here for me? Are you going to take care of me?
And, one of the things you said was, despite what the parents might want, one of the things that helps children thrive, or at least this is what I heard, is having some structure and some stability, as well as consistency, but also as least impact to their life as possible.
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes it can be hard you want to have consistency in your schedule without rigidity, right? You want to have the ability for a kid to say that they want to have some input, and like, hey, this exciting thing happened. I want to be able to see the other parent and tell them about it. And you have to decide, is this the time where I say, okay? Is this a time where I say, let's have a phone call? Or for whatever reason, this isn't going to work this time, right? I think this is where having a parenting plan when your kids are in that age, right, can be really helpful, because it can give you something to fall back on. Like, this is our structure. This is how we're consistent. This is what we know what to expect. And flexibility that, yeah, this exciting thing happened and you want to have both of us there at your concert. Doesn't matter whose night it is, right?
Yeah,
both
or an exciting opportunity. Going back to your dear favorite Aunt Susie. Aunt Susie calls up and invites dad and child, but it's not dad and child's weekend to go see Disney on Ice or whatever. See, you use Susie and I use Disney all the time. That's where the flexibility comes in with, like, is this really impacting your life that much?
Right.
To be a little bit flexible with the schedule, as opposed to allowing your child to have perhaps this special opportunity that they don't get every day.
Right. Yes. And I think that also kind of weaves into like adult decision making and what is an adult theme that you want to avoid having conversations with your kids about, even when they are themselves adults. So I think using that as an example of, if you have the belief that the other parent is trying to steal your time,
right,
or is using their greater financial resources to try to bribe your kid into loving them, right? These are things that parents really have a lot of concerns about. Sure. Sometimes it's really a valid concern.
We certainly hear it here at the divorce firm.
Yeah, and so I think being thoughtful that you might still have those thoughts, and that that's not the kind of thing that you say to your kid, right? You could say, that's not going to work out tonight for whatever reason,
right?
Without saying, your dad's always trying to buy your love and, take you on these extravagant things that happen to fall on my weekend. Don't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
We could have a whole nother video on the don'ts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I think that, we have folks ask us a lot, like, when do I tell the kids? How do I tell the kids? I feel like we've covered a lot of that in this video, but I also know that we are the most underqualified, non-licensed, overpriced therapists that there are in the world as divorce lawyers. So, yes, at Triangle Smart Divorce, we'll help create a plan, and part of that creating a plan and being smart about it is involving folks like yourself to help understand what is the developmental age of the child, which may not match the chronological age,
Right.
and what is age appropriate to share, and some of the do's and the don'ts and the hows and the best ways to have these conversations and such. So where can people find you if they want to actually hire a professional to help them create this plan or talking points, or I won't say script because we don't want to be that rigid, but
Yeah.
outline the conversation and when to have it?
Well, the practice is KKJ, Forensic and Psychological Services, which is a mouthful. And so the website is easier to find. It's kkjpsych.com. And I welcome emails at drkatrina@kkjpsych.com.
Thank you.
Yeah,
This was a
thanks
pleasure.
for having me.